Grandpa, as he's called on the trails, raised $37,000 for the Tunnel of Towers Foundation charity. Since 9/11, the foundation has built specifically adapted smart homes for catastrophically injured veterans and first responders and provided these American heroes and Gold Star, what's that? Oh, and Gold Star families mortgage-free homes. Listen to the trials and tribulations of his almost 2,200-mile through hike that started in Georgia and ended in Maine. 1 out of 4 people that sign up to hike the Appalachian Trail actually complete it. So Dave is a big deal. Round of applause for Dave. Thank you to our sponsors today. Fallon, our lunch sponsor. Coffee sponsor, Worcester Rehab. We have a trail mix, which was created by Quinsigamond Community College, their Hospitality Recreation Management School, in honor of Dave. Welcome, Dave Manca. Let's take a hike.
How you doing, folks? Can you hear me all right in the back? Okay. I'm a little nervous today. I'm not a speaker per se. Actually, I'd rather have a couple of drinks, maybe sing your song and exit right, but we'll give it a go. So when I sat down with Suki, they come up with a program, so we're not willy-nilly up here, but yeah, what enticed you to take this adventure? Number 1. Number 2, Appalachian Trail facts. Talk about your charity, preparation, training, food, journal, communications with loved ones, hardships, food, shelter, safety, animals, interesting stories, and stories from people you met. And the last question, will you hike the trail again? So right off, what enticed me to do the trail is I like challenges, and it wasn't a lifelong dream, but I'm going to say in the past 6-7 years, I put a lot of thought into it, and it's a really big commitment. And I said, if I'm going to walk 2,200 miles, I want to do it for a cause. Hence, I was already a $11 a month donor to the Tunnel for Towers Foundation. I checked them out online, and just for your knowledge, 95.1% of every dollar goes back into, or goes out the door. So they're a wonderful organization. So I chose to hike for them. There was a few hardships leading up to my hike. I was going to go in 2021, but then I discovered it was my 50th wedding anniversary and I wouldn't be around. So, and then COVID hit, and that messed everything up. A friend of mine back home, Craig Toohey from Phillipson, Mass., was planning on doing the hike, and I didn't know about it, with a friend of his, Jeff Lafrenia. So I had talked about starting off with them, even though we probably wouldn't stay together. And that never came about because I broke my back. So they did the hike in 2022, and I almost had my surgeon talked into it, but he talked me out of it right at the last minute and advised me against it. So, and that's how I came about to do the trail. So now we're gonna, that is the trail, that line right there. It's a long walk. Just to give you a short history on the trail, Benton McKay right here had a vision of having a footpath from Georgia to Maine. And that was in 1921. So in 1925, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy was founded. 1931, this guy here, Myron Avery, began 7 consecutive terms as the executor of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. So he got the ball rolling. Then they finished the footpath in 1937 with help from the CCCs, as you can see up there, the civilian conservation camps. Earl Schaefer hiked it in 1948, and he was the first one to report a through hike to the ATC. This is about my foundation. I'm just a few bucks shy of $37,000, and if anybody would like to donate, go to t2t.org, Solo Grandpa, and my webpage will come right up for you. These are shelters here. This was my primary shelter, my tent, and it's a pretty small house. There's hardly room to even sit up in there. Room for me and my pack, and that was it. And this whole side is a screen. It's not material. This is probably the worst shelter on the whole trail that I happen to have a picture of. They're not all that bad. A lot of them are much better, but they are all open in the front like this. Normally there's a platform right across here where between 6 and 12 people lay down, depending on the size of it. You're sleeping on wood, and I lost my shelter notes here, but I knew this was going to happen. But anyway, I avoided shelters like the plague. I mean, the shelters were often crowded. I stayed away from as much as I could, but when it rained, I looked for one on my map. Trouble is, everybody else is looking for them too when it rains. So for the most part, it was a roof over your head and a place to lay down on a wood floor. That's what you lay on. You blow up your air mattress and get your sleeping bag out. The mice in these shelters are almost domesticated. I mean, you can literally get up at night and put your headlamp on and watch them crawl down the wire and try to get into your pack. One morning I woke up, I was repacking, and they took trail mix from somebody else's pack and put it in my pack, so I imagine they were planning on staying there. So I'm glad I emptied it out. This here is on top of Bromley Mountain. This was a luxury. I stayed there one night. I was actually 1.5 miles south of here in a shelter. My good trail pal named Moon texted me and said, "Grandpa, where are you?" I said, I'm in a shelter down below the summit. And he said, "Well, come up here." He said, "We got lights, electricity, heat, and everything." That's actually the place for hikers to rest or whatever, and maintenance and stuff like that on top of Bromley Mountain in Vermont. So that shelter was a real luxury. This here is a hut. It's a self-contained building for hikers, but not through hikers. These are for weekend hikers, sectional hikers, and you pay big dollars to stay in these things. And it's carry in, carry out. They give you an evening meal and a breakfast and a bunk bed and some toilets for like 140, 160 bucks, depending on what hut you're in. This one here, I did a work for stay. I really lucked out. That's on top of Mount Washington, or just down from the summit. And me and another hiker from Germany got there in a brutal storm. It was freezing rain. We almost got blown over while we were hiking. And we did a work for stay at this one here. You sleep on the floor. You're supposed to do 2 hours worth of work, and they give you a place to sleep, but not a bunk. So that was the only time I stayed in a hut. This was my send-off. Oh, one more thing about the shelters. They vary in distance on the trail. I had a map. I had an app on my phone. They're anywhere from 4 to 8 miles apart, but they can be 10 to 14 miles apart. So if it's getting late in the day and you've got some rain coming in or something like that, you really got to think out your day, which I wasn't real good at, but that's why I ended up in a lot of trouble a lot of times, but we'll get into that. This was my grandchildren. I think this was the night before I left for my send-off. My granddaughter drew this. This was on the back of my pack for the whole hike. You can see it in the back there later on, but that was my advertisement. This is my granddaughter Gracie who drew that freehand. All right, training, preparation and training. I read probably 4 to 5 books on other hikers who had done the trail. Gave me a gist of what I was getting into, and they were all good books. Everyone was different. While I was recovering from my broken back, I charted my whole journey in a, what they call an Appalachian Trail Journal right here. This book was like gold on my hike. All the information for the whole hike. And the reason it's ripped up, a lot of guys don't take this with them because it probably weighs a pound, and every ounce in your pack adds up. Something might weigh 3 ounces, but then you put 2 or 3 things more in there, and before you know it, you got another pound. So a lot of people don't take this. So what I did when I got to a certain section, I tore it out and mailed it home, and then did it this one, just like that, all along the trail. I kept mailing it home. But this, to me, was that was my lifeline. That book. So anyway, for preparation, I hit the Stairmaster heavy. This here is it's a pack frame, and you can put weights on it, the plates. Like right there, I got a 25 and a 10, so that was 35 pounds. And I trained hard on this Stairmaster, and thinking that my pack was going to average 35 pounds. Well, it averaged quite a bit more than that, but with food and stuff. So that was my training. I never really did hike outside because it was winter time, and I figured this was better for me right here. So food prep, these boxes over here, you can see all the writing on them. You can't really read it, but if there's a line through the writing, that means it's already in the box and we're still waiting for stuff. So I made up 16 of these boxes thinking this trip was going to take me 16 weeks. Each one of them had 7 days worth of food supply. My pack is in this duffel bag. That's how I got it on the airplane, because I had a knife in there and stuff like that. And so I put it all in a duffel bag and shipped it cargo on the plane and flew to South Carolina. I bought all my food ahead of time, obviously, and it was put in these boxes. So my wife needed a 4 to 5 day window to send me a package, and plus I had to find a place that would accept my mail drop and hold it for me. So there was a lot of logistics to work out. I had to look at the terrain, the weather that was going to be ahead of me for the next 5 days. Then I had to find a place that would accept it. One time I had a real hard time. None of the hostels in the area would accept it. I found a motel that would accept it, but I had to stay at the motel, so that's what I did. It worked out really well. We only lost 1 mail drop, and I ended up getting it back 4 or 5 days later. But I got to a hostel, and it should have been there the day before, and it wasn't, so that created a problem. I ended up leaving that hostel with no food. I dug through a hiker's box. Every motel or hostel you go to will have a hiker box. And what that is people, that may be their last stop, or they might have too much weight in their pack, so they put stuff in there. It's amazing. You can get a pair of gloves sometimes. You can get I got 2 headlamps out of them. When I didn't have food, I dug through the hiker box. I was in New Hampshire. I got a big bag of granola mix, and he had some noodles and stuff that I could dump some water in. So that's how I made it through the next 4 days until I got my food drop. Now this is tracking devices. This is what my family looked at home. This is a Garmin GPS. It has a tracking feature on it. they knew as long as this was on, which sometimes it wasn't, but they knew right where I was all the time. And I often had I had problems with batteries. I'm getting a little ahead of myself now, but I had a phone, I had my Garmin GPS, and I had a little power booster. And battery power was actually my biggest problem on the trail. I had a little booster that would boost this up once and my phone up once, and that was it. And then if I didn't get to a place to charge them within the next 5 to 7 days, then I'd be dead without a power, with no power. This Garmin I turned off a lot during the day just to save power, and then I would turn it on maybe 2 miles before where I planned to stop at night. That way my wife could pinpoint where I was, and if you look at the maps down back after, you see little pins in them. And then were all my stops along the trail. So getting back to the food, I carried a normal day for me. Well, I'll actually read you what I started with. I got to have my coffee in the morning. And if you look at that table later on, there's 2 tin cups up there and a little red stove, orange stove. That was my kitchen right there. I mean, for 4 months. So normal day, I'd get up, make a cup of coffee, instant coffee. I'd have an instant oatmeal. Once in a while, for luxury, I swap that out for Pop-Tarts. But Pop-Tarts are very heavy. During the day, I had 2 Snicker bars, a Honey Stinger waffle, which is just it's a little energy waffle. I put some on the table back there so you could see them. 2 Pro bars. A Pro bar is it's a bar, it's like a Cliff Bar or anything else, but very high in protein and calories. So I ate 2 of them a day, and then at night I had my Mountain House meal, which is a freeze-dried meal. And I'm going to tell you, I really look forward to that hot evening meal. Just boil 2 cups of water and voila, instant. I carried 7 days. Every one of them boxes we showed you earlier, there was 7 days of food supply in there. And I carried 7 days worth of food for the first 1,100 miles, but I was killing myself. 1,100 miles was half the hike. Many times on the trail I had people say, "Grandpa, what the hell you got in that pack?" It's like, or they'd lift it up to move it or something. And they say, "My God, you carry that every day?" I says, "Yeah." My thought process was, if I carried 7 days worth of food, it saved me getting off trail to go to town and restock. Likewise, would save me time. Well, it did save me time, but I paid dearly for it. And so after 1,100 miles, I didn't want to do it, but I called my wife or texted her or something and said, "You got to take the remaining 7 or 8 boxes and cut them back to 5 days," which saved me probably 4 pounds, maybe 3 pounds. Because you would just get the feeling good. You'd be hiking along and you say, "God, this pack really ain't that heavy." But what you do is you eat the weight out of your pack. So after 6, 7 days on the trail, you've eaten most of your food, your pack becomes lighter, and then you get to a hostel, you pick up your mail drop, and you throw 12, 14 pounds in there. Now I'm back up to 42 pounds again. So it was a rude awakening, but just something you had to do. I got ahead of myself on communication, but the journal, this here, I opened up an account on trailjournals.com. In the beginning of the hike, I wasn't real good at it. I'm not a techie guy. Had miserable weather my first week. My daughter Lindsay's back there. I said, "Dad, when are you going to put something in your journal?" Well, finally I got where my fingers would work at night, and I started typing. But one problem was, you can type till you're blue in the face, but if you ain't got 2 bars of reception on your phone, you can't send it. So, and there was nights, my hands were shaking, they were so cold, I'd get a whole thing typed out, and my little pinky run down on my phone, and boom, gone. So, but anyway, I got the gist of it. I didn't do it every day. Sometimes I'd fall behind. I actually texted my daughter. I'd say, what did I put in my last journal? Because I don't want to repeat myself. But this way here, it was nice for people. They were able to follow me and along just by, I think you could still, Lindsay, you'd still go on journal, right? You can still go on here and read it. So this here was just a booster from friends at the gym and friends back home. They just put little captions on there, but me being not techie, I never even knew when somebody posted something on my journal because I didn't know you could do that. So this is, as I said earlier too, battery power was a big problem. Now this here is Amicalola Falls in Georgia. This is where you do your orientation. The ATC has a building there. You do your orientation. And then you can start here. I didn't do it because it was 8.9 miles to the top of Springer Mountain, but it wasn't part of the Appalachian Trail. So I'll confess to all of you right now, I figured if I'm walking 2,200 miles, I don't need to add 9 more miles to it. So what you do is you go up to a trailhead and you actually hike backwards for 0.9 miles. And you touch the marker on Springer Mountain, and that's when your hike starts. You hike back to the parking lot, and then you start the trail. Take a good look at this physique right here because it's going to change in some of the photos that are coming up. This some examples of trail magic. This one here was probably the best one I ran into. I didn't run into a lot of good ones, but everyone is appreciated. It can be something as simple. This here is a cooler in the woods. It had some cold drinks in it. It actually had a couple of them Seagram's things in there, which you're not supposed to do on the trail, but there was a few of them in there, some pop soda, some waters. People would they'd put them far enough off the road that somebody driving by wouldn't see the cooler. So you'd be just hiking down the road and boom, there you go. And another thing, water is a big problem in some of the states. So you'd find 8, 9, 10 jugs, plastic jugs of water in the woods away from the trailhead. And at first I shied away from them because they're not sealed or nothing. At first I didn't know that much about them, but later on, man, they came in handy, I'll tell you. New York was a very dry state for me. Many, many times on a trail, I pushed it too hard, and I ended up with no water at the end of the day. Having walked by maybe 2, 3, 4 springs, but every sign I read, 0.25 miles off trail, and I just hated to leave the trail to go get water, but I burnt myself with my own match quite a few times because I found myself at the end of the day with not enough water to cook with. And then I'd be borrowing water from other people. Well, you don't borrow water, but getting it from other people. And I felt like a heel doing that, but that happened to me 4 or 5 times. So getting back to this trail magic, you can see this guy you come down off the mountain, you go across the road, and then your eyes light up right in front of you. Here it is. That's a little pull-off on the side of a road in New York, one of the roads that crosses the trail. This guy even puts a tapestry rug down, tablecloths, chairs. I was his first customer that morning. I thought I died and went to heaven. Would you like some pancakes, sir? I said, yeah. Would you like blueberries? Yeah. Would you like sausage? Yeah. And he got 2 helpers with him. He does it once a week, switches off days, and it was amazing. And these coolers over here, they had so many drinks. He had boxes of chips and Chips Ahoy cookies and all kinds of snacks. He begged me to take more snacks when I left. But his name is Mike Pacer, and he got a website. He takes pictures of every hiker, logs in some information about them, but trail magic it's unbelievable how much you appreciate it. This lady here is from the inner city in New York, I think Brooklyn, and her and her husband bought a place right here, tore it down, used the foundation, built another place, and that's their weekend getaway. So she just started doing trail magic. She got a little sign here. I think it says it's 1,337 miles north of my starting point, and I think 841 from Maine. And I was her first customer that day also. This is on her lawn. She didn't have a lot of stuff, but it was appreciated. I wasn't eating right. I mean, this banana was like gold to me. Cold drinks. This lady here is a Southern cookie lady. Many, many years ago in Dalton, Massachusetts, a lady who actually lived in Connecticut owned some property where the trail crosses a highway in Dalton, Mass. And she started baking cookies, and she was known as the Northern Cookie Lady. So you try to, you get your first cookie free, and if you want any more, they're huge cookies. And unfortunately, I didn't get a picture of the Northern Cookie Lady. So she gives you one free. If you want any more, they're $3 a piece. And she's got quite a reputation. She's in the Journal. You can find her on the app. Well, this lady here is the Southern Cookie Lady. She's in North Carolina. Same deal. First one's free, and take all your, then you buy them after that. Unfortunately, I had just eaten something before I got there, and I wasn't hungry, so I never got to sample the cookies. I spent about 20 minutes there, got some fresh water. They had filtered water there, so I was able to water up. And by spending that 20 minutes, it cost me dearly because I got caught in the rain before I got to my next shelter. So, but I get to meet the Southern Cookie Lady. Getting back to journals for a minute, I also kept a pad with me. And I did a handwritten journal every night. Some nights it was just a few sentences because I knew it would bring me back to that day. I fell behind quite a bit, sometimes 2 or 3 days because of weather, getting camp set up late. Some nights I was cold and freezing, didn't want to get it out. His tent was wet, whatever. I didn't want to get my pad and pen out, but I always caught up on it. And I'm actually rewriting everything now. So between my journal and my handwritten journal, everything is coming back to me almost day to day. The whole hike comes back to me. These are just, now we're going to start the hike. Started in Georgia. I believe I crossed the Georgia-North Carolina line. I think it was 5.5 days. And it was probably well, at that time, it was the worst conditions of my hike. I mean, it was horrible. We got caught the very first night. A big storm came through. It was predicted, but nothing you could do about it. I passed the shelter. I had an opportunity to get in a shelter. I didn't because I wanted to get mileage on. Ended up camping out right beside a dirt road up in the mountains, and that was a disaster. I had never set my tent up at home because it was wintertime and you got to put pegs in the ground, so the ground was frozen. And I'm thinking, it's only a tent. Well, I set it up that night, and it's got what they call a bathtub bottom in it to keep the water out. And I just threw it up quick, ran out of time, and I paid dearly for that also. Everything got soaked that night. I'm surprised my phone worked because it was in water when I woke up. The storm blew, changed directions during the night, and I had that screen front on my tent, and all the water blew into my tent. It was hell. So the hike started there, and the weather didn't get no better. Next couple of days were cold. It froze up really bad. I mean, my fingers are freezing. Some mornings I couldn't undo my tent lines that I tied to trees and stuff. My fingers are frozen. I had to keep putting them under here like this to warm them up. About the 4th or 5th day of my hike, I was trying to make, I think it was Carter shelter. It rained. The rain was sideways all day, freezing rain sometimes. And I said, boy, if I can just get to that shelter. Well, I got to the shelter. There were so many people in it, some of them couldn't, I mean, there was no room. And they looked at me, I could tell they're looking at me like, you ain't coming, there's no room. And they felt bad for me. It's like a lost puppy on the sidewalk, you know. And I'm looking, I said, there's got to be a spot somewhere. And I thought about crawling under it, and then with the snakes and the mice and rats, I said, no. I went and set my tent up. Well, then everything froze that night. The next morning, I actually had to sit on my hiking boots 10 minutes to thaw them out. I just sat on my boot. I never started hiking that day until 11 o'clock because my fingers, everything was froze. A day and a half after that, I got together with this hiker on a trail, and we headed for a motel in Franklin, North Carolina. We found the shuttle driver. It looked like Tent City inside that motel. I just took my sleeping bag, my tent. We had stuff hanging all over that. You had to, just to dry out. It was bone-chilling cold. This night here, I don't know what this building signifies because dummy me don't stop to read signs. I'm too interested in putting miles on. So, but it's called Way-Ah Bald. It's in North Carolina, and this was probably the coldest night of my whole hike. Down over, the trail continues down the mountain here. I stayed in a shelter that night, and there was 6 other people, I think, in the shelter. And other people had tents. You just couldn't get warm. We all had 20-degree sleeping bags. When we got off the mountain that night, down into a gap, there was a lady who had a bed and breakfast down the road. She set up a trail magic, and that was like godsend. I mean, she had hot coffee. I said, how cold did it get last night? She said, well, it's only 7 above right now, she says. And it was horrible. I had lost one of my gloves at the motel. So when I was at that trail magic, a guy looked at me. I got a green knit glove on this hand and these $45 mittens I had just bought. I didn't think I was going to need mittens on this hike, but anyway, he looked at me, he said, hey, he says, I know where your other glove is. I says, where? He said, it's in Franklin, North Carolina at the motel. He was in the same motel. I said, well, where is it now? You didn't, he said, it's on the front desk. I called the motel, tried to get it forwarded to a hostel. They wouldn't do it. I said, look, if it's $3, $5, I'll mail you a check later. But they wouldn't forward my glove, so that kind of ticked me off. $45, I got to use it 3 days. This is North Carolina still, Max Patch. This used to be an old farm homestead, and then a logging company bought it, logged it all off. They wanted to keep it clear, so farmers started grazing sheep up there. You find a lot of these down south, a lot of balds, that's what they call them, balds, tons of them. This here is Clingman's Dome. I always thought, being from New England, Mount Washington was the highest mountain east of the Mississippi. Well, it's not. And I didn't know that till I hiked the trail. Mount Washington is 6,200 and something. Anyway, this is 643. And you can't see nothing standing there. So they made this ramp where you can walk up, all the way up into this dome, hence the name Clingman's Dome. And the view up there is exceptional, 360 degrees. The day I was there was lousy weather. You're in the Smoky Mountains, the fog rolls in and out, and I took a few pictures, but they really don't justify what I saw there. This here is Newfound Gap. There's a history behind that also. We're time limited, but I can't tell you about all these spots. But this is a big tourist attraction. There must have been, I bet there's 150, 200 cars in the parking lot. A lot of people. I was one of the first through hikers that come through that day, so they were very inquisitive of me, asked me all kinds of questions. I wish I could have spent more time there. It was a beautiful day, and I was picking up donations for the Tunnel to Towers. So, but I had to get going. And I'll also mention the terrain. It started right around Clingman's Dome and all the way through the Smokies. Just off the top of my head, there's 100 different species of trees in the Smoky Mountains. I don't know how many different salamanders and creatures, and it's a very diverse forest. It's almost like the Pacific Northwest. It's like a rainforest. So this is heading into the Smoky Mountain Wilderness. This guy here is a friend of mine. His name was Joker. We were friends, but we were in a little private competition, a silent competition, because he thought he was the oldest guy, and when he found out I was a year and a half older than him, he had just turned 70, and I was 71 and a half, so he didn't like that. And he was a great guy. I missed the guy, but he was just, he was a little different. I told some of the other hikers, I said, you know, his trail name is Joker, but he's dry as a popcorn fat, so I don't know where he got the name Joker. You know, he's just something else. But we got along good. We saw each other many times throughout the trail. Here's a couple scenery shots of the Smoky Mountains. You can see the fog just, it rolls in and out all day long. Hence the name Smoky Mountains. When you head into the Smokies, they want you to have, I think it was 4 days worth of supplies to make sure you don't get stuck in there. I happened to put on some big days in the Smokies. I think I did a 20, 2 21s, and maybe a 23. I'd have to look back at my log, but up till then, mileage was, I'll just take a few minutes to talk about mileage. I started this hike thinking I could do 20 miles a day. Well, you can't. The terrain, the weather, there's days, I mean, there was one day I did 11. I was ashamed of myself, but that's all you could do. You know, then the average turned into 15, 16. I kept telling myself, I gotta start putting some 20-mile days in here. And you really had to get a mindset to do it, because the terrain's constantly changing. So I did start racking up some big days. All right, now we'll discuss the animals a little bit. I didn't see a lot of animals because I fall a lot on the trail. The trail is a hazard. There's so many things to trip on the trail. I'd be going with my trekking poles like this, and if I looked in the woods for a deer or something, I'd trip on something, take a header. And I was getting pretty banged up. We'll talk about that when I get to the hardship section. Anyway, I didn't see a lot of animals because of that fact. I just couldn't take my eyes off the trail. For that fact, I did see a lot of snakes and creepy crawlers. And I like seeing the snakes before they see me, so that can work either way. I watched a guy in front of me once, he walked right over this big black snake, he was 4 feet long. And then the guy in front of me goes like this. So the other guy didn't even know he walked over me. He just happened to step over him like a limb. I did see quite a few deer. They're used to seeing people, so they weren't real frightful of us. These here are wild ponies. They're up in the Grayson Heights, what they call Grayson Heights in Virginia. Here again, there's some history behind that. There's also balds up there. Years ago, farmers used to graze their cattle up there. They'd herd them up and run them to town, but they found out they were losing too much weight running them to town, so they made a weigh station closer to the top of the mountain. Then the logging industry took over, cleared the tops. Then they wanted to keep them bald, you know, like they did with Max Patch. So they let this is a very hardy breed of pony, and they are wild. They're domesticated because they see so many people, but they're truly wild ponies. They turn them loose and they fend for themselves. They round them up once a year at the weigh station. They get some vets to volunteer. They check them out. Somebody wants a pony, they cull the herd a little bit, and then they just turn them loose again. All different colors. This here is a swamp that I walked beside for about a mile in Harper's Ferry, and there was more turtles, mostly snapping turtles. This is green slime on top of the water. So when the turtles come up, the slime just dripped off of them. These are some of the creepy crawlers I saw. This here is a millipede. They get the big ones between 3 and 3.5 inches long. I bet I saw 100,000 of them on the trail. If you touch them with your finger or something, they coil up and just lay there. They coil up like a coil spring. I don't know what the name of this one was, but these average like 1.5 inches long. This here, I was in a shelter one day at 2 o'clock. Actually, Joker was there with me and some other hikers. I had to go down to the shelter to get water. It was 0.2 of a mile off trail. I didn't want to do it, but I said, I got to have water. So I walked down there, and everybody there was going to stay in the shelter, except old solo grandpa had to put some more miles on. I wasn't out of that shelter a half an hour, and the skies just opened up. They had predicted it. All the other guys told me, it's going to rain, you know. I said, yeah, I know, but I want to get 3 or 4 more miles on. Well, it got so bad. I was up near the Blue Ridge Parkway. I don't know if I can't remember if you're supposed to stealth camp near the highway or not, but I got in a weed patch and kicked all the weeds aside, so made a level spot for my tent. And I said, well, this will do. It was already raining. I got my tent up, and this is what I woke up in the morning. And that's just one, I mean, there was between 60 and 70 slugs on, they're all outside my tent, but I don't care. You wake up to that in the morning, it's like, wow. And these here, this is all poop. As they're crawling around, they just poop all over the place. I had to clean my whole tent off. I thought I had all of them. Well, a couple got rolled up in the thing, yeah, and they died there. And the next time I took my tent out, it was horrible. To just smell like dead fish. These guys here, they don't hurt nobody. I think they're a rat snake. This guy, I believe, is loaded with mice. I think every one of them bumps is a mouse, I think. Because he was pretty docile. I mean, I leaned right over. He didn't really care about me at all. There's nothing to compare him to, but he's about 4 feet long, that guy. This guy here is a black eastern racer. They take their tails, when you agitate them, they snap at you, but they're not poisonous. And they kick their tail against the dry leaves so they act like a rattlesnake. I had to call home to get that information from my niece's husband. This was a snail. He was out of his shell on the ground. And I really wanted to picture that, but he was a little camera shy and got back in the shell before I could boot my phone up. This here is just a selfie with Watega Lake in the background. I had just I stayed in the hostel the night before. I keep mentioning hostels, and maybe a lot of you people don't know what a hostel is. If you live anywhere near the trail, say you got an extra room in your house, sometimes it turns out to be the whole house. They turn their house into a hostel, and what they do is they've all got shuttle service. You call them up, you say, hey, I'm on the trailhead. Some like a reservation, some don't. So it's crowded. Some are better than others. I mean, I stayed in Glasgow, Virginia. They must have had 16 hikers in the house, 1 bathroom, 1 shower, 1 washing machine, 1 dryer. They had a hell of a breakfast, but that was the best part of it. And then some others, I stayed in one, New York State. She had 4 bunk beds in a room. So it took 4 people at a time. That was great. But that's what a hostel is. And these people make a good buck at it. They do it, it's seasonal. And they got a shuttle service. The house is wide open all the time. They'll just leave and go pick you up. Some of them are big enough where they have a driver just to do the shuttles. So I had just left a hostel called Boots Off Hostel, and it was a beautiful day, and this lake was just gorgeous. This is taken from Tinker Cliff in Virginia, and I got to tell you, that was one interesting spot. If I had a place like this when I was a kid, my mother she'd never know where I was, because they form like natural caves. There's rocks, as you see in some of the photos coming up, there's rocks as big as a school bus piled on top of each other. I'm not a geologist. I think they're from the glaciers, but I also think a lot of this come up out of the ocean when the Appalachian Mountains burst out of the ocean, because there's a lot of beach sand on the trail. It's sugary sand. It looks just like beach sand. You see a lot of it there. And these rocks made some formations that are just unbelievable. Pictures don't do them any justice at all. I mean, I could just, your mind wanders when you're there. I could just picture myself playing Army up there with my brother and my buddy when we were kids and stuff like that. I mean, my mother she never would have known where I was because we'd be up there all the time. These are memorials. This Shelton graves. It's graves because there's two of them in it. I knew it was coming up. I saw the sign. I was trying to put a big day in. And I didn't know how far off the trail it was, so I just blew right by it. And then I was mad at myself because I had read up on it, but it was too late. I wasn't turning around. Well, I ran into some hikers later at a shelter. They went and saw it and got pictures, so he sent me this picture. These are two Confederate soldiers. They joined the Yankees during the Civil War. So they came home once for a gathering, and the Confederates took care of them. So they buried them up in the mountains. You see all kinds of memorials. I don't know who this guy was, but he was pretty important. That's all concrete. That's his grave. Didn't say who it was, and that's way up in the mountains. This is a memorial to Audie Murphy. How many people know who Audie Murphy was? Well, that's not his grave, but that's a memorial to him. It's on Brushy Mountain in Virginia. Because after all that poor guy went through his whole life, if you remember, I mean, he got wounded 3 times during the war, 24 medals, and he ends up crashing his plane on Brushy Mountain. And this is on Brushy Mountain, so that's the memorial for him. I mean, you see other memorials. I was walking one day and I saw a stone with some etching in it. It was some guy from Connecticut. That's where he wanted his ashes. So somebody just put a stone on a trail. So a lot of graves and memorials. Harpers Ferry is an interesting town. A lot of history to this town. It's where the Potomac and the Shenandoah River comes together. And it was, I believe it changed hands, I think 2 or 3 times during the Civil War, north to south. A lot of history in this town. I ended up staying here at a hostel. Actually, it was an old inn. And I plan on going back there so I can spend some more time there. It's also where the abolitionist John Brown, he rented a farmhouse in Kentucky undercover and started a small army. I think it got as big as 20 or 21 guys. And their plan, he was an abolitionist, wanted to free the slaves, and he had some inside information on the Federal Armory in Harpers Ferry. So he knew what he was doing when the guards changed and all this stuff. Well, he raided it. And it was a big deal back then. I think it was three years before the Civil War started. And he didn't make out so well because they executed him and his 3 sons. Actually, one son gets killed fighting, and they executed the other 2. But there was a bell that got named after him in that town. And that bell right now is in Marlborough, Massachusetts, and I believe it's in front of the fire station. Tavio, is that where it is? The bell is in front of the Marlborough fire station because a handful of Yankee soldiers stole it, and they stored it in a barn. I think that was in Kentucky. And after the war, they came back for the bell, sent it home. And it's still a contentious point between the 2 towns. Obviously, Harpers Ferry wants it back, but I don't think they're ever going to get it. So this here again, not wanting to stop. I didn't read what it was about. This is in a park in Maryland. 1887 is obviously after the Civil War, so I don't know exactly what it signified, but it was a pretty neat looking thing. And this whole area was a national park through here. The trail, I think, is only 37 miles of trail in Maryland, so you're in Maryland. You're not in Maryland long. Then you move into Pennsylvania. This is the Mason-Dixon line. in Pennsylvania. I got in a little trouble here, and I'll explain that under my stories later. But this here is the halfway point, 1,090.5, and this is 1,090, north, south. That's the official halfway point, and boy, was I glad to see that. Actually, that hat I got on is a borrowed hat. The night before, I had stayed with some good friends in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, hung my hat on the doorknob in the house and left without it. I got hiking on the trail hotter than hell, and I said, oh, I ain't got my hat. Well, lo and behold, about a mile or two later, I cross a brook and I look on the trail and there's a hat hanging on a branch. So I put the hat on, and you didn't worry about cleanliness on the trail at all. So I don't care whose sweat was in that band, but I needed a hat. And then I continued every time I caught up to a hiker or passed a hiker, I would say, this your hat? Nope, nope, nope. So me and that hat spent some time together. This is just another sign. It's in Windsor Furnace, Pennsylvania. Katahdin, 965 or 85 miles. Always a good sign when that number right there gets smaller when you see a sign. Yeah, we'll talk about hardships a little bit now. My very first day on a trail, the weather was horrible, as I already told you. This happened my first afternoon. I never started my hike till noontime that day. I stubbed that toe 3 times bad the very first afternoon, bad enough where I thought I was going to have to leave the trail. That thing throbbed so bad, just the weight of my sleeping bag resting on that toe at night just drove me crazy, 24/7 in pain. This was when it got better. I know it doesn't look better, but it's so when you start hiking, your feet swell up. I started this hike with the wrong boots. I thought they were the right boots. They're $300. I thought they were right. So anyway, they weren't what you want for hiking. And I found out later you always buy at least a size, sometimes a size and a half bigger than what you need, because your feet swell, and boy, they do, I'll tell you. It got so bad back when I was telling you about trying to put my shoes on when they're frozen. I had to put a carabiner through the back tongue and pull on them just to get them on. I was in agony. Started talking to hikers on the trail, and they said, Grandpa, look what you got for boots. No wonder your feet hurt. I said, what do you got? You know, look, they got hiking shoes, but they look like sneakers, only they're made for hiking. I said, what about ankle support? He said, your ankles will take care of themselves. So after 7 days of suffering, I went through a little, it's an outdoor, it's a resort, little resort town. They do whitewater rafting, canoeing, all that stuff. It's called Nantahala. And I went into the outfitter store. I didn't get a lot of information. There was a girl working. She wasn't an expert on shoes, but I tried some on. They had a little thing you could walk on downhill, and I said, yeah, these will do. $130. Sent my other ones home. They packaged it up for me, sent them UPS. Well, I'll tell you, it was 100% relief right from the get-go. Just having something on your foot that didn't constrain it so much. So when it rained and froze, there were some mornings that I told you my fingers just wouldn't work. I endured many cuts and bruises, as you can see. And where else can you go on vacation and get 8 new toenails for free? That's how many I had by the end of my hike. I had 8 new ones. This thing here happened just before Munson, Maine, just before the 100-mile wilderness. I did a face plant that day. I knew I cut it bad, but I couldn't see it until another hiker says, you need some stitches. So I got to the last hostel on the trail, which is Shaw's Hostel in Maine. It's a very, very popular shelter. It's famous. And there was a gal that worked there, and she was an RN, or used to be an RN, whatever, but I begged her to sew it up for me, but she wouldn't do it. Put sturry strips and wrapped it up and put some medicine in there, and away I went. And it closed up fine. It kept opening up on me, but I actually, when she bandaged it, I didn't even look at it for 6 days after that. So she did a good job. These are examples of the trails. I put in my journal one time, I said, everybody thinks this is a footpath from Georgia to Maine. Well, it's anything but a footpath. These are just some examples. This is the trail Manca. And believe me, they're pretty rare. I did some night hiking once. I got up early in the morning. My air mattress sprung a leak, and I was sleeping on the ground. I couldn't stand it. I got up 3 o'clock in the morning and started hiking. And you'd be surprised how few and far between these Mancas are. They're usually Manca tree. I mean, I hate to complain about the volunteers. I told one guy once, I said, I swear to God, they make you guys buy the paint, because sometimes you'd go a quarter of a mile, you wouldn't see a Manca. Am I on the right trail? You know, because you can get lost on this trail. There's that's a trail Manca right there. So this is what you had to climb up. Just an example with your pack on, right up through here. This here is, this is in Pennsylvania, because I recognize the rocks. There's a Manca on the tree right there. There was places in Pennsylvania, I renamed it Rocksylvania, because there was times your feet did not touch earth, ground, for I don't know how far, a quarter of a mile, sometimes a mile. You just from rock to rock to rock to rock. It was just incredible. I mean, right here you can see some the size of the hood of a car, and you had to jump from one to the other. Actually, I like them better than the small ones, because the small ones twisted your ankles. But in northern Pennsylvania, it went on for miles. Somebody put a little extra work into it here to help us out, made some steps. And while I'm on this subject of trails, I want to dig into it more myself, but I don't know how they made some of these trails. There was granite steps. You could see drill marks in them. I'm talking way up in the mountains, no roads. I don't know how they did it. They didn't have battery drills back then. You know, the trail was completed in 1939, 1940. I don't know if they had donkeys with little gas-powered generators on them or something. I don't know. But you can see the drill marks, and they actually took time with bars and stuff to arrange stuff like steps in a lot of places. This was very common, going through swamps. Under here, and maybe one there, you put what they call sleepers, just a round log, and then you put the boards on top of them. A lot of them in the Maine and the White Mountains, where you had to cross boggy areas. This one here was in New York State. Sometimes these would go on for hundreds of yards, just swampy stuff. These are some more trail conditions. This is a Kern or a Kern, depending on how you pronounce it. And them things actually bailed me out more than once when I was in the fog and rain on top of a mountain. And the hash marks, you couldn't see them painted on the ground. So you follow the Kerns, and they actually redirected you to the trail, so they helped me out quite a bit. There's an example of some of the bridges down south. They're nice bridges down there. I only had to wade one river down south, excuse me, and that's because the bridge got blown out during the winter. I come to a rude awakening when I got to New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine. There are no bridges. This is a trail example from these rocks are soaking wet because it's raining in this picture. Doesn't really do it justice. Some of them are 45-degree angles. I wiped out more than once on these rocks. So bad one night that in the shelter, there was a gal in New Hampshire. There's always a caretaker for the shelter. They live in a tent 7-8 days at a time. She had a pretty good med kit, and she patched my arm up. I lost all the skin from here to here because I went just tumbling down one of these things. But she patched me up good. Here's an idea of here's a trail marker right there. Some more trail conditions. Here's an example of another bald. This particular day was a very hot day. I actually complained about it. I texted my daughter Lindsay back there, and she said, "You're never happy. 2 days ago you're freezing, now you're too hot." But you can see the trail. right there, winding its way up. Here's a suspension bridge down south. They really put their time into the bridges down there. Sometimes you had to squeeze through stuff like this. These steps are anchored into these rocks. This is in New Hampshire coming off of Moosilauke Mountain. And sometimes they put them, and I'm thinking, after some of the stuff you have to crawl and climb up over, sometimes I look at the steps like, why didn't you put them back there when I needed them, you know? This is a memorial, which was pretty nice. This is in New York State, and I guess on a clear day you can actually see the city from here. This guy done a nice job. It's in memory of September 11th. He actually got chastised about this from some people. They called it graffiti. This, no, it's just a scenery shot. This is my only picture from Connecticut. I don't know if people around here are familiar with Connecticut, but like Massachusetts, when you get away from the cities, it's beautiful. Western Connecticut is beautiful. This is a little village called Falls Village. Connecticut, I had pretty decent hiking. You're not in Connecticut that long. I think that's only about 40 miles of the hike in Connecticut. And I'll tell you, when you leave Connecticut and go into Massachusetts, you got your work cut out for you, I'll tell you that. It's uphill, 3 major climbs coming into Massachusetts. That's Mount Greylock up at the monument up top. I mean, there's a view of Massachusetts landscape, that one and this one. Mass state line. This is the day my family come out to see me, when I got to, where was I, Pat? Oh, Great Barrington, Mass. We made plans. I got up that morning. I think I had 11 miles to hike that morning, and I met them. Drove into town. They brought one of my food boxes with me. I didn't need everything they brought, so I dumped it all out and repacked my pack. This is my normal appearance on the trail. This here is a back tag. I wrecked mine. That's saying that you're a through hiker. And the color changes every year, so that's the purple was the 2023 color. This is my sweat rag that hung there through the whole hike. This bottle has a built-in filter in it, and all I had to do was stop and dip it in a brook, and I could drink right out of it. Normally, my Garmin inRates would be hanging right here. I don't know where it is in that picture, but the timing was impeccable for meeting them. They pulled up like 3 minutes before I got there. So we went to town, and I'll give you one of my stories right now. That we went into town, had lunch. I gave them a whole 2 hours and 15 minutes of my time. They brought me back to the trail. I had a target in mind, the shelter I wanted to get to, because there's a storm coming in. Most of the time, I didn't set a destination. I just winged it, and I paid for it dearly a lot of times. But this time here, I figured the timing was right. I was going to get to that shelter. Well, the rain came a little bit early. Big thunder boom has come, and it was pouring. Then it would clear up a little bit, then it'd pour again. So I'm hiking like hell, and I was out of water, or almost out of water. I needed water for the nighttime to cook my meal. So I looked on my app on my phone. I had an app that showed me the trail, and looking for a water source. Well, there was 2 or 3 of them, and every one was dry when I got to it. So now I go to reach for my phone to find out how far I got to get to the shelter. No phone. I kept it in the cargo pocket right here. I'm thinking, what the hell, you know? And I'm looking everywhere, and I said, did I stop and put it in a baggie because it was raining and put it somewhere? And then I panicked. I said, oh boy. I figured I was close to the shelter. I took my pack off, put my headlamp on because I knew I wasn't going to make it back by dark. Grabbed my trekking poles and started going backwards. And I'm looking everywhere on the trail. And I had stopped to answer nature's call in a patch of mountain laurel. I don't know if you know what mountain laurel is, but it's like this. And I'm thinking, when I dropped my drawers, the phone came out. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to find that spot. So that was on my mind. I kept hiking. I think I went 2.2 miles, and there it was laying right in the trail. Got rained on. So I grabbed it, found the problem. There was a hole in my pocket. So I got back as quick as I can. So now that's 4.4 miles extra that day just to go find my phone. Luckily, I found it. I got to the shelter. I said, the hell with the water, everything. I just laid down and went to sleep. So that's actually listed under one of my hardships, but I figured I'd tell the story now because we're in the area. That's right side the road up there. All right, people. These two gals here were my favorites of the whole trail. I labeled them my adopted granddaughters from New Zealand. I met them on the first night of my hike, and we just kept bumping into each other at the weirdest places and weirdest times throughout the whole hike. In fact, I said to them once, we're destined to climb Mount Katahdin together. That never happened, but great gals, very friendly. And everybody on the trail knew that we had a relationship between us, a good bond between us, because I'd see somebody somewhere and, hey, you seen the Kiwis? Yeah, they're 2 days in back of you, or they're 40 miles back, or whatever, or they're ahead of you. You know, we always kept track. This is my buddy Joker again, and this is Professor Sprout. He's from Wisconsin, nice guy, really nice guy. We still keep in touch a little bit. Fast hiker, very fast hiker. This is my buddy Moon. We connected. We only saw each other 2 or 3 times, but he's a great guy. I used to call him a giraffe because I hiked with him one day. I basically hiked alone, but one day I hiked with him, and I didn't complain, but he was killing me. I mean, his legs are this long, you know. Plus, he was 39 years old. This is taken in Elton, Virginia. It's my brother Mike, who did me a lot of favors on the trail. Would you come out 4 times, Mike? You made deliveries 4 times. He was driving Mom's car back from Florida when we met. And here again, the timing was impeccable. I had to put in like two 21-mile days in order to meet him in time. You know, so he's not picking me up at dark, so we had some time to visit and stuff. So we went out to eat that night. I ate almost all of this stuff before we even went out to eat. Mike couldn't believe how much I could eat. There's a thing they call it hiker's hunger. It's supposed to hit you in 3 to 4 weeks. Well, it took me a little longer, but when it hits you, you can't eat enough food. You're like a machine. You're like a garbage disposal. You just can't eat. You don't get full. So every time I get to a hostel or went by where a road crossed or something, I went by a gas station with food, you're always grabbing something. My go-to food was ice cream and Coca-Cola. And I hadn't had a Coke for probably 8 years before I went on the trail. These are my spare clothes. These pants and this shirt didn't quite make it. I had to replace it, excuse me, 250 miles short of the finish. These pants, other than the pocket ripping out, they had one little hole in them after the hike. Incredible. That was my attire for the whole hike right there. And this, when I got to a motel or a hostel and I had to do my laundry, I had this pair of gym shorts, or bathing suit. That's a bathing suit, and this shirt. A couple pair of underwear and a pair of socks, and that was your life for 4 months. This is Welcome to Vermont, the long trail. The long trail and the Appalachian Trail go for, well, that's 273. I forgot how many. Oh, it follows 105 miles. They follow each other. It's the same trail. I was very disappointed in Vermont. I couldn't wait to get to Vermont. And when I got there, I was just disappointed with the trail maintenance. The brush was growing right over the trails. I was starting to get into the crappy weather. Everybody knows what the weather was last summer. You couldn't swing your poles, and that's what keeps me from falling, because the brush was coming over. It would stop my trekking pole from going forward. So I didn't care for Vermont other than the fact that my cousin put me up in Rutland, Vermont. And here again, my brother Mike brought me a food box and met me out there. And the guy sitting next to him over there, Tavio, raise your hand, Tavio. He, every time Mike came, Tavio had gifts in there for me. Power bars and stuff. I kept telling Mike, tell Tavio I can't carry no more stuff. Tavio said, well, give it away then. It was great stuff, but oh my God, what a load I had. Vermont is basically when the rain started for me. It was horrible, horrible, horrible. I don't know how many of you heard of the hiker that died last year on the trail. The last place anybody saw him was Stony Brook Shelter, and I stayed in that shelter. And I know right where he crossed. It was just a little brook, you could jump across it. And there's so much rain coming out of the mountains, he tried to cross it, and away he went. And that was the end. They found him a mile and a half downstream. He was from New York State. So, but that's the last shelter he stayed in, Stony Brook Shelter. And while we're on that subject, Stony Brook Shelter, it comes under people I met, but two young fellas from Shrewsbury, Mass., which is right down the road, you all know that. I was stuck in that shelter one day and it was pouring. Hikers were coming and going, trying to get one more shelter in and stuff, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna make myself a coffee. I go in my pack, no stove. I tear my whole pack apart, no stove. These guys are listening to all this, these two young guys from Shrewsbury. And I said, I ain't got a stove. It must have, when I threw my pack on during the day, I kept it in the side pocket, it must have went flying. Now what am I gonna do? You can't heat water. So they were hiking together and they were nice enough to give me one of their stoves, which is really big of them. Because they just say, hey, we're together all the time, we'll just wait a little longer for one of us to boil water at night. So I never got their names, but they live right down the road here somewhere. Under people, so many names, Moon, Joker, Professor Sprout, fella named No Brakes, he's from Ayer, Massachusetts, Hot Legs, he's from Leominster, my buddy Blacksburg, Shiraka, B. Silva, Ghost. I met 3 different guys on a trail with the name Ghost, and there was actually 3 Jokers also. But almost everybody had a trail name, and if you didn't start the trail with a trail name, somebody would probably give you one, so you were better off picking your own, because you never know. I met a guy in Franklin, North Carolina. We took a shuttle back to the trail after that cold night. I said, what's your name? He said, Mad Dog. Oh, I'm Solo Grandpa. I said, how'd you get your trail name? He said, well, I didn't have one until 2 days ago. I said, well, how'd you get that one? Well, he went through a trail magic at a trailhead. There was a couple there doing just pastries and coffee and stuff. Well, she had one of them Australia blue heeler dogs. I didn't have no problem with the dog. He said, you remember back there when they had a trail? I said, yeah. He said, well, that dog, I went between her and the guy, and that dog nailed me. Bit him in the leg. He had to go to a hospital. You're taken care of. So hence he got the name Mad Dog. But it's funny because nobody knew your real name. Ooh, I gotta get going here. Nobody knew your real name unless they read it on one of your mail drops or something. I don't know anybody's name that I was friendly with from the whole trail. It was just trail names, that's it. Hikers were a lot of foreign hikers. Hikers from all age groups, I mean it. There was a lot of them. I mean, most of them are younger folks, but maybe taking a summer off from school or college or something, but they were from all age groups. There was a good amount of retired military. I ran into quite a few of them guys. So I had only, that me? Nope. Mine's off. So I hiked alone basically my whole hike. That's the way I wanted it. One guy named Blacksburg kind of latched on to me. Really nice guy, terrific guy, but after 2 days I just had to tell him actually I did tell him when he started that I hike alone, but he didn't take it to heart. Anyway, we made 2 days together, and then I hiked 1 full day with Moon. Other than that, I was alone the whole So, let me see, stories that stand in mind. So I have a few stories, just a couple. I got to get into them real quick here because we're running out of time. But I think the story that stands out the most in my mind was if we went back to the Mason-Dixon line where I told you I got in trouble. I come out in a big, huge park. I mean, wicked big park. You could get married there. They had all kinds of stuff for the kids. They had pavilions. I ate my supper there, and I asked the old timer there, he was like a caretaker, if I could pitch my tent back of the building. He said, oh, no, don't do that. I said, look, I did 25 miles here. That was one of my biggest days. I had it. So I hiked back to the trail across through the park and looked in the woods, and I saw there's no houses. I went in the woods where nobody could see me and put my tent up. Well, that night, I wasn't sleeping good because my tent wasn't level, and I kept sliding off my air mattress. I finally got to sleep, and I hear this crunch, 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 crunch. Oh, my God, what the heck is this? And I said, that's not an animal. So all of a sudden, my tent just lit right up. And it says, whoever's in the tent, get out. I said, who are you? We're the Massachusetts State, Maryland State Police. And there was a few letters mixed in there or whatever. I think they said DCR, but I'm not sure. But anyway, I come out of my tent, and they had me blinded. There was one there, one there, and one there, and I couldn't even see. And I said, can you cut the lights? I says, a little bit, you know. And they saw I wasn't who they were looking for. And they said, you're not supposed to be camped here. And I says, well, there's no signs. You're on park land. I says, you know what? I said, I'm 71 years old. I hiked 25 miles today. I said, there's no gas left in the tank. That's it. So here I am. Then I walked up to them, and I see two of them had ARs hanging here, and the other guy had a service revolver. And they lightened up immediately when they saw I wasn't who they were. They were looking for two fugitives, but I'm looking at them. Ain't you guys kind of overdoing it, you know, for sleeping in the park? You know, so that was a rude awakening, but I come out of it all right. They ended up finding the two fugitives, I guess 2 or 3 nights later. The second story that stands out in my mind, I was hiking. I don't know if you noticed some of these pictures, but the trees are 20 and 30 yards apart in the woods down south. Wicked open hardwood. There's no underbrush. There's a lot of shooting going on to my left over a hill. And I'm hiking along, and you know, it's fairly close. And I just wanted to get out of there. I'm trying to get to Harper's Ferry, actually, and all of a sudden I hear this ping, ping, a bullet come through the woods and hit three different limbs, like 8 to 9 yards in front of me, right, you know, from here to the stage in front of me. And it was losing velocity at the time, but it still clipped 3 limbs, and I watched one limb with some leaves on it just fall to the ground. I started yelling like hell, and the shooting stopped for like 2 minutes, and they started again. But in reality, I should have hit the dirt, but I didn't. So I just yelled and kept hiking, but found out later there was a shooting range down over the hill, and somebody obviously shot over the berm that went up the hill and then come down to my side. Points of interest. Well, this is New Hampshire. Uh-oh. What happened here? Oh, there we go. Franconia Ridge in New Hampshire. Remember in the beginning when I told you to look at my physique? When I was at the, you look at my arms here, there's nothing left to them. I bought a medium-sized pack, and I ran out of adjustment on it, and it got really sloppy on me. That caused me some problems later when I hit the rain. This is up on Franconia Ridge in New Hampshire. That's the trail right there. Sometimes you get on these mountains, you look backwards and you say, wow, I was there 3 days ago. You could pick out the mountains. This is top of Moosalookie Mountain. This is when I didn't have no food, and some of these day hikers heard about it, and they heard me talking to somebody else about it, and they started offering me granola bars and stuff. This here is the main New Hampshire line right here. This here is my, I don't know what you call this thing. They call them a buff, I guess. But for keeping mosquitoes and stuff out of your ears and sweat off your head, I wore that quite a bit. This is Maine. I don't know if anybody have been up to Rangeley Lake in Maine, but that's Rangeley Lake right there. That's Saddleback Village up on Saddleback Mountain. The water content in the woods was just, it was unbelievable. I think I had 11 river crosses in Maine, and there was more than one where you really took your life into your hands. It was super bad. The power of water, when you're up to your waist in water and the river's pushing on you, you had to be very, very careful. These are just an idea of some of the people make these, and they're fairly accurate. As long as there's a level spot on a trail, they'll make one, and they're fairly accurate. They're within 1 or 2/10 of a mile of being that exact. This one here I had to fix up because the wind blew the leaves around when I got to it. So this is looking down the Nolichocky River in Tennessee. As you can see, it's still early in the hike there. These are some of the rock formations. Pictures don't do them no justice. I could never find one like this when it was raining. Seriously. I know, look at that rock right there. The thing is, it's even bigger than a bus. It's an old schoolhouse. I believe it was North Carolina. There was 5 or 6 people in there jamming. They get together every Saturday and they play some of that Tennessee Rocky Mountain music. They were great. Here's another place I would have liked to find when it was raining. This hole, I should have laid something here for a reference. This is huge. It's probably 12 feet wide by 15 feet, and it goes way, way down. Man, if I found something like that when I was a kid, I'd have ropes hanging down that thing. We'd have a fort down there. And this is approaching the end of my hike. That's Mount Katahdin right there, and that's Mount Katahdin. And there's the end of the hike. Everything worked out good in that moment. I had carried some tie wraps the whole time with me, and that's my trekking pole. And the wind blew just the direction I needed it at that exact time, right there. Now, I got just a couple more, I got a couple minutes here. Points of interest, McAfee Knob is one of them. If you ever did any literature on the Appalachian Trail, it's a cliff, or it's a butte. It hangs out like this, and you can sit on it, but there's nothing below you. It just sticks out. It's probably the most iconic place on the whole trail for taking a picture. And yours truly walked right by it and never saw it, because I was just hell-bent for leather, putting miles on. Another good place was what they call Dragon's Tooth. It was actually technical, more so for the southbound hikers than the northbound. I had to get down it, but if you're southbound, you got to get up it. Tinker Cliffs was nice. Harper's Ferry, I already talked about that earlier. And I'll say this about the trail. The trail is a pipeline of information. Like I said, if I wanted to know where the Kiwis were, that's what I call my New Zealand granddaughters. You could send messages northbound or southbound, just through hikers you met on the trail. It was great, because not everybody had phone numbers. On the trail, we shied away from talking about politics or religion, and we all got along just fine. You're a different person when you're on a trail. You're a much gentler and kinder person. There were some hikers who thought I was a bit of all right, and I said, well, you wouldn't want to be sitting next to me in traffic, I says, because you'd see a solo grandpa that you're not seeing right now, you know. But that's all you got to do out there, is just take it all in and think. So it was great. It was a challenge. I only had one confrontation. Some guy come out with a comment about we should forget about 9/11, and I happened to be hiking for them victims. And that didn't set too well with me. I kind of had to get in his face, and that calmed down quickly. But so one of the question Suki had on the thing was, will you ever hike the trail again, and would your wife let you? I'm going to tell you, it's a huge commitment. You give up your whole summer. I didn't have my garden. I have a cottage up the Maine. I didn't get to use my cottage. I left my wife, who's sitting right over there, behind with taking care of the chores at home. I don't want to point the laser at her, because stand up, Patty. So she had to keep up mowing the lawns, and we heat with wood, and I left her with that to do, and well, lo and behold, the wood furnace malfunctioned about a week after, and she called the oil man on me, so that didn't work out too good. So I'm glad I did it. I probably won't do it again. There is the CDT, which is a Continental Divide Trail, and the PCT, which is a Pacific Crest Trail. If you do all three, it's called the Triple Crown, and I'd like to do that, but I just don't know if I can make that commitment again. I think I could do it, but it's just you give up so much to do this, and it's expensive. I remember sitting in my tent one night thinking I should have just wrote out a $7,500 check and sent it to Tunnel to Towers and stayed home, because that's what it cost me to go on this trip. You know, there's only, getting back to if I'd ever do it again, there's only 3 guys in their 80s that have completed it. And I actually met the 4th guy who's trying to complete it. His name is Old Scout. And I'm kicking myself in the butt. I didn't take a selfie with him, but he had just turned 80, and he's trying to be number 4. So I was, you know, you never say never. And I got to thinking, if I really want to tick off my kids when I'm 80 years old, I might do it again. So we'll see. One more thing.
Careful with the cord.
If anybody has any questions, I'll go hang around my table back there for a few minutes. You got a question, sir? Why did I pick north? Well, if you're hiking south, you normally leave in June, because you got to wait for the snow to get off Katahdin. I actually think a southbound, which is called Solo, would be easier in some respects, but I really don't know. I haven't done it. My choice was I'm less busy in the spring. And in hindsight, I wish I would have left in February, because I put up so much bad weather anyway that it wouldn't have mattered that much. And that way, you know, they close Katahdin October 15th unless you're certified for mountain climbing. So you got to get there before October.
Dave, this was incredible. Thank you so much. What an incredible story.